Well, good day. My name is Chris Yelland from EE Business Intelligence, and it's a really great pleasure to have two really interesting companies here, which I'm going to be interviewing and exploring some of the topics around renewable energy. And these two companies are firstly the Shoprite Group. Well, the Shoprite Group is very well known, I think, to everybody in South Africa through their stores throughout the country and through their 6060 delivery vehicles, which deliver stuff to my house and to everybody that I know. So we've got here with us today Sanjeev, Raghubir. Great to have you here, Sanjeev. Sanjeev is the Chief Sustainability Officer at the Shoprite Group. And also with us today is SPS, Sustainable Power Solutions. And today we've got Anja Visagie. You are the Chief Growth and Marketing Officer at SPS, also a technical background as well, I hear. And Hanno Mostert. Hanno is the Chief Asset Manager at SPS and responsible for a very significant fleet of assets in the renewable energy sector. And maybe as a starting point, if I can address this to you, Sanjeev, can you just give us a quick idea of the Shoprite Group and where sustainability and renewable energy fits into your group?
Super. Thanks, Chris. And thanks for having us here as the Shoprite Group. For us, it really starts with our purpose. So within the group, our purpose is to ensure that our products and services are affordable and that we protect the planet. So whatever we do, is closely aligned to that. Our switch towards renewable electricity supports that in a number of ways. On the one hand, we're able to acquire renewable electricity that's affordable so that we can pass on these savings to our customers and maintain our affordability, because that's an obsession within the group. And on the other hand, we can also decarbonize our operations, whether it's our distribution centers or the more than 3,500 stores that we have within our portfolio. We can reduce the carbon intensity of the electricity that we use.
Yeah, and maybe we can move to you, Anja, and ask you if you can detail what is this relationship between the Shoprite Group and SPS. Explain to us what it's really all about.
So Sustainable Power Solutions is a renewable energy provider. Our mission or ambition is to be the most trusted private utility partner, reimagining energy for our clients. So we've had the privilege to be working with Shoprite over a number of years and providing them energy through a power purchase agreement, which is a method that we could sell power to them. So we would retain ownership of the solar plant, we would build it, and we would look after it, and we'd essentially sell the power to them at a kilowatt hour rate.
So I know, as Anja has explained, you are the asset owner and you are the you're the Chief Asset Management Officer of SPS. Was it always this way? Or did you start as an installer and then grow and become an EPC and then grow further to start owning your own assets and maybe even buying back assets that you previously installed around the country? Just give us a little bit of background on how you became, an asset ownership company as opposed to an EPC or an installer.
SPS has its origin in two separate places that grew over time to come together. The SPS brand started with a EPC company many years ago, with one of our current founders still being involved in the business that started that, and that started a bit earlier than the asset ownership business, seeing as building assets for clients was a bit sexier earlier, if you want. Then later years it became more as a business case to actually own the assets yourself. And that's then when, back then it was Metal Solar at its foundation. And the two companies had worked together from Metal Solar's foundation, first as partners, then as part owners. So Metal bought into the SPS company. And then later we completely combined as one single brand. As the business case for solar energy grew in South Africa and Namibia and actually the wider Africa continent as well. So asset ownership really became let's call it a business case around the mid 2010s, so 2015, 2016, around there. And that's when us as an asset ownership business really found our foundation. And it really found a foundation in the fact that clients wanted the solar energy, but they didn't necessarily want to build a whole industry around having that. And so as an asset owner, that's your competency. So that's what SPS brings to the table, and the asset owners brings to the table is we bring the solar energy to the client and take the hassle away from them from owning the asset for all practical purposes.
Sanjeev, if I can just, in your relationship, do you own any of the renewable energy assets in your stores, or is it provided on a power purchase agreement with companies like SPS, or is it a combination of both? And has it always been, did it evolve in any way from starting off maybe owning your own assets and then deciding that this wasn't your core business?
So we took the decision early on not to own any of our assets. So, we've got more than 100 units or systems, solar PV systems with power purchase agreements across the country and including in Namibia as well. So we are a retailer by heart, and we wanted to use our capital to further that cause. Yeah. To invest in our stores and invest in our delivery vehicles and our delivery service, as you mentioned. So for us, it made a lot of sense. But there was an evolution, right? From, initially in terms of the contract, in terms of finalizing a power purchase agreement that was weighed and satisfying the requirements of both entities, both companies. And I think back in the day, we were fortunate to be engaging with Metal Solar in the early times to actually finalize that contract, make sure that both parties benefit from the contract.
And just to clarify, I think you mentioned you have 3,500 stores around South Africa. How many of those have got rooftop solar PV or parking lot solar PV or solar PV and battery storage of any kind whatsoever? Are you very far down this road, or is there still a long way to go?
Yeah, there's still a long way to go. So of the 3,500 stores, of course, we've got about 100 or more than 100 of our own power purchase agreements, and that's including our distribution centers. Of course, with the distribution centers, there's more space, so we can go with a much larger system there. On the stores, though, we don't have the opportunity to use the roof in all of the centers and all of the locations that we are based. So in many of those locations, our landlords have taken the initiative and installed solar PV systems. So if you look at collectively, all of the solar PV systems, our PPAs, landlords, etc., it accounts for about 7.2% of the electricity that we use. So currently, our renewable penetration is in the order of magnitude of 7.2%.
And yeah, I'm interested in your comment. You talk about landlords and maybe what is the breakdown in terms of properties that you own and you are the property owner, or properties that you rent or lease, where you're dealing with a landlord, and it's really the landlord's responsibility to develop these renewable energy resources.
Yeah, so it's landlords are up in the 90s. So in fact, higher than 95%. We have just a handful of assets, including our distribution centers, which now belongs to a property fund, which Shoprite is a part owner of. But yeah, in terms of the ratios, a very small percentage of stores are owned by the group.
I see. And staying with you, Sanjeev, if I may. Obviously, I guess a big driver to start off with must have been load shedding in South Africa, and the need for security of supply. Did you see renewable energy as meeting that driver, or were you busy installing diesel generators left, right, and center all around the place? In other words, was the security of supply driver fundamental in your renewable energy approach, or was it not really that important?
Not really. I think with the supermarket, you need electricity 24 hours a day. So you have your refrigeration that's running even at night, which accounts for about 50% of the electricity that we use. And in fairness, we had started the solar journey before load shedding really became an issue. The technical people will know that unless your solar system is integrated into your generator, you can't use your solar system when there's load shedding. So, load shedding did a couple of things for us. On the one hand, it helped us to accelerate, or gave us that drive to accelerate, but particularly because we felt that we were also taking a load off the grid. So by us installing our own solar PV systems, or SPS in this case, and having the power purchase agreements, we could then use electricity that was not taking there was not coming off the national grid.
So as I understand you, the driver for you was primarily commercial. In other words, saving of electricity, reducing the burden on the grid, and decarbonisation, as opposed to security of supply, was not the primary driver. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So commercial and environmental. Yeah. So those are the two reasons that
That's really interesting, because for many, certainly for residential people, the driver was security of supply, and the commercial and savings, came later. But yeah, I'm sure with the prices of electricity rising, there is a need to hedge at least part of your electricity supply to renewable energy, where you have a known cost of electricity that is escalating at a known value per annum, probably somewhere in line with CPI, and that must be important at this stage. But yeah, so I'm interested to try and understand, that for you, the actual benefits to your organization were largely commercial. Savings on grid electricity costs, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, our purpose is to be the most affordable retailer in Africa. So by us being more efficient and more affordable with our electricity spend, then we can bring those savings through to our customers. And that's what we're proud about. There's an obsession within the group to be affordable, and using renewable electricity helps us to deliver on that.
Hanno, being a commercial person, financial person, I think by background, and now an asset manager, as it were, what kind of financial services and financing options do you offer your clients? I mean, do you act as a financier yourself, or do you engage with boutique financiers and banks who handle the financial aspects to finance these projects? Or do you do this in-house? Are you like a bank?
Well, good question, Chris, and yes and no. So we obviously do have investors into our business that bring equity for us to be able to support this business model. But then we do also engage with external debt providers like banks and boutique financiers that brings an amount of debt into our business. And that really allows us to give the client the best of both worlds in terms of the tariff that we can offer them, while also still making a bit for our own shareholders and making sure that our business is sustainable. So to give you some kind of an idea, I mean, our project IRRs or returns that we do get on a business would not be attractive to as a business return. So we do have to bring quite a number of debt into our business from the banks and the financiers. And because we've got such a large fleet and a good track record, we do get that at attractive rates also. And we can pass that on to our clients. And in doing that, we can give them the best of both worlds in terms of the renewable penetration that Sanjeev has alluded to, financing security around a stable tariff, that they know exactly what the tariff is and how it's going to grow over time. So in the Shoprite Group example, we structured the PPA for them with a fixed tariff, with a fixed escalation, which basically means that Shoprite has got certainty around the price of energy that they get off of our PPAs. We've got many other examples in our business where we structured PPAs or equipment rentals, where you can have a fixed rental with no escalation. You can also have a fixed tariff with no escalation, especially in our dollar environment like Kenya and Seychelles, where we do deals in US dollars. They don't like inflation in that environment, so we can give them much lower escalations or even no escalation. So really an environment where we tailor deals according to the client's needs, while taking all of that effort of owning the asset away from the client.
And Anja, moving now on to some of the technical aspects, equipment, the inverters, the batteries, the solar PV panels, do you kind of buy on the open market, as it were, or do you have arrangements with particular OEMs, with particular suppliers, where you develop a relationship with that supplier, with that OEM, knowing the features of that product? In other words, are you kind of committed to various specific product brands and types, or is it a free-for-all project by project?
We try to be brand agnostic, Chris. So, we've got trusted brands that we've worked with over many years. And of course, because we have such a large fleet of assets, we also try to keep the products very similar from an asset maintenance perspective. So if Hanno's team has to look after, Hanno, how many plants have we got now to look after?
Just over 140.
Over 140 plants, and they all have different products and equipment. It becomes quite a difficult thing to do, and especially to keep spare parts, because part of the offering that we offer to our clients is that we take care of all equipment replacements over the contract term, which in some cases can be as long as 20 to 25 years. So we always try to be on the cutting edge as well, because obviously technology changes. Solar panels has, doubled in efficiency over the last 10 to 15 years. So we do try and see what's new out there. And we've built good relationship with most of the large suppliers, of the key components, like you've mentioned, the solar panels and the batteries. But for our purposes, we try to kind of limit who we use, but also not get behind on new technology.
I can imagine standardization of products must make Hanno's life a lot simpler, especially some of these smarter products which require programming and software, and to be able to standardize on solutions that are that can be rolled out to a company like Shoprite Group.
Consistency of design is very important. That helps your team to be able to fault find in a system much more easily, because it's all designed in a similar fashion. Devices is more complicated, because you can stay with the same supplier and the device you use today would be much different to the one you used yesterday, just because of the technological advancement, the speed of advancement that we are seeing. And so you can pick a supplier, and you'll have, in any case, 15 different inverters from that supplier in your fleet, just because you've been around for so many years. So for us, it's important to know that the equipment that we're using are safe and are on standard, and that they can last the life of the project. That's much more important to us. Having different pieces of equipment in your fleet is simply part of the business that we are in. But we also obviously do try to build relationships with OEMs, because that allows us to deliver better services to our clients as well, because you've got speed of O&M reply, but you also have financial sustainability if you've got someone on the other side that can support their product. And I think for the whole industry that matters quite a lot, because we've got these long assets, right? We're talking about 20, 25-year assets here, right? And so, think back 20 years where you were. So it feels like a long time, right? So, and to think that the asset, of this complexity and nature needs to last that long, it's quite important that you do keep that standard high when it comes to components.
Yeah. Sanjeev, just explain to us, the Shoprite Group, how energy intensive is your business? At first glance, I thought this can't be a really energy intensive business. It's retail, it's shops, it's lighting, etc. But on the other hand, there's refrigeration and air conditioning. How much? How energy intensive is your operation?
So it's interesting. So as a retailer, we're not that energy intensive, but we're certainly energy dependent. So if you look, up the value chain, our manufacturers, etc., our processes, they're particularly energy intensive in terms of the amount of electricity that they use. But for us, like you talked about, for example, the refrigeration that has to be on 24/7 for a number of reasons, for food protection, food safety, also for freshness. So we want to offer those value propositions to our customers as well. And that's why they come to us. So not necessarily energy intensive, but certainly energy dependent.
Yeah. But then moving to the question of decarbonization. Obviously, electricity, certainly Eskom electricity is high carbon electricity, and you want to decarbonize as a group. But how important is electricity in this decarbonization process? You have fleets of vehicles, probably running on diesel, most of them. You have fleets of motorcycles running on petrol. I'm interested to find out how important electricity is as a decarbonization vector, as opposed to other energy that you use, such as liquid fuels.
Yeah, absolutely. So very important for us. If you look at our different scopes in terms of emissions, like Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, electricity is in our Scope 2 basket and accounts for a significant amount of our Scope 2 emissions. So, with regards to decarbonization, we've signed up and have our targets verified by the SBTi. So we've got this ambition to be at net zero by 2050. We have this ambition to halve our emissions by 2030. So, this is all part of our decarbonization journey, that if we can increase the amount of renewable electricity, certainly rooftop, then that helps as part of that journey. Of course, in the longer scale, and we've seen with rooftop solar, is that we can get to a maximum penetration in a store of around 30 to 35%. And then we've got to look at other ways to try and bring renewable electricity into our stores, like, for example, wheeling. So that's where we are now in our journey on renewables.
I'm going to get to wheeling, interesting topic that I'd like to discuss with you further. But before we do that, Hanno, you have touched on this, the different options that you offer customers, etc. But it is quite confusing, and I'm interested to find out where the majority of customers are going these days. Obviously, there's not one size that fits all. But, I mean, people buy and finance and buy it on their own balance sheet. They own it and they maintain it and they operate it. And then there's the rental model. Then there's the leasing and option and the power purchase agreement option. It seems like there's quite a lot of options available for customers, but where are things heading in your world?
Chris, it's interesting. Obviously, the environment we're in is changing extremely quickly. I mean, I think that's the one thing. I mean, sometimes we mid-year have to change strategies around how we're doing things, just because the environment is changing quickly, the technologies are changing quickly. So I like to use the analogy of motor cars. Everybody drives a motor car, everybody has one. Most businesses have got delivery vehicles, and so it's easy for people to understand that, right? And so in the motor world, you've got the option to buy the asset, you've got the option to lease the asset, you can go and borrow money to buy the asset. And for solar, it's exactly the same. When you buy that car, you have to register it, you have to make sure it's safe, you have to service it every year, you have to also make sure you're keeping up with technology, and is it still the most efficient car that you've got, and all those type of things. A car just lives a bit shorter than a solar plant, so in that instance, it's a bit different. But so the options in the solar environment is much the same. So the client has got the option, if they've got their own equity, to go and buy a system outright. They can go to the bank and lend money. In that instance, you're obviously giving up opportunity to actually do this, right? So instead of investing in your business, buying a new machine, or expanding your business, you now go and invest in something like a solar plant, which is maybe not core to what you do as a business. And and then you've got the option to say, well, guys, actually, there's these other guys that do have the money available, they do have the expertise to optimize the system and make sure it keeps on being the best option that you could have. And so then you can go and lease that system. And you can lease the system on a different array of models. So a PPA is just a form of a lease where you actually just pay for that system based on the utilization. So similar to if you've got a digger loader and you lease that digger loader based on the hours that you use it, electricity is much the same. So now you lease the system based on the amount of electricity you offtake. Then we can do, like I say, fixed rentals, where we say, well, you've got certainty of the price, so we give you that every single month. You pay for it the same price, and it doesn't then matter how much electricity you offtake from it. So the options, and like saying, then we could do a mixture of the two of them. We also do mixed deals for the likes of Shoprite and the landowner, where the guy that owns the building says, but this is my roof, but Shoprite says, yeah, but we actually the energy user, and so can one tailor then a deal where there's benefit for the landowner.
And sharing a risk.
And sharing the risk and the financial
like
impact
insurance,
of it.
for example. The question, who can get the best deal on insurance? If you're a Shoprite group, maybe you've got group insurance that can get a better deal than the landowner who's got a specific property. So this sharing of costs, sharing of risks.
And sharing of benefit obviously also matters, right? So I think for the industry, it's important to keep up to date with what the needs is out there. But like I said, for the industry, it's very important to make sure we've got assets out there that perform optimally, that is funded in the most efficient way that we can possibly find. And then so that, because when it's looked after well, it's still real things that does real stuff in the real world. It breaks down, it got issues, and looking after it matters. It matters from the performance of the system. So remember, if you don't clean the solar panel, you don't check the connections in the DB, and you don't monitor the inverters often, you are going to get an environment where your system underperforms, and that makes it less viable as a business case for the owner of the asset, but then also for the user of the asset.
Sanjeev, we talked about trading, and I want to get back to this now, because I just see when you have wheeling of power, typically from a large generator to a large off-taker, one-to-one, there's a need for a long-term power purchase agreement in order to amortize the capital cost over a long period of time, over the lifetime of the plant, 20 years or 25. But there are many companies, maybe even Shoprite, who just don't have a commercial view for the next 20 years. And it seems to me a big risk and a burden to put on your balance sheet a take-or-pay contract. It's like a liability for the next 25 years on your balance sheet. And many companies are just not ready to sign that kind of PPA and would much prefer, to buy on a much shorter term. And then the role of a trader comes in that buys in bulk from big generators, wheels power and sells it to a whole basket of small off-takers. I give the example of Vodacom, where they're buying power, as a group from big generators and selling power to 15,000 cell phone towers around South Africa. You've got 3,500 stores. But would it make sense, and is it interesting for a company like Shoprite to rather deal with traders rather than install behind-the-meter solutions? Are these competitive options, or is there a place for both of them, or is there going to be a shift away from behind-the-meter to wheeled solutions? What is your view on this as a Shoprite Group?
Not necessarily competitive, but more complementary.
Complementary.
So we find both, and we have to go down both ways, embedded, rooftop, as well as wheeling. And I think, coming back to the points around the equipment, the asset, etc., for us, what's important is the reliability. And I think a company like SPS offers that to us, in that they manage the maintenance, they manage the cleaning of the devices, they manage the reporting of it, to ensure that we have consistency in supply. And that's important, because then we realize our savings and we realize our decarbonization.
And another thing to consider, Chris, you mentioned that, typically it's a long-term commitment if you would go for the funded route. And historically that was the case. Contracts were typically about 20 to 25 years. And the aggregators or the traders can offer shorter-term contracts. But we find now, with the cost of equipment being where it is and the electricity tariffs where it is now, it actually still makes sense for providers such as SPS or similar to be able to write shorter-term contracts. So we are able to offer competitive rates at a 10-year contract, and in some cases even 5 years.
So it seems like you're competing. You're able to compete with the traders who are offering these shorter-term terms on their contracts, on their PPAs.
I think we can offer the same duration. The tariffs would not be at the same competitive level, but the advantage is it's for customers that doesn't want to take on the risk for the long term. They can still have a saving. They don't have to put down the capital. They don't have to take out a loan, and they can start saving from day one. And then the option is, of course, that if after the 5-year period the contract could be extended for a nominal maintenance fee to kind of go on. So then the client doesn't have to worry about the system ever, and they don't have to take on the long-term risk.
I know, just to explore the point that Anja raised, a trader is buying big. They're buying from 100 megawatt plus kind of generators, and they're selling small. So they're able to perhaps get really good prices for the energy. Are you able to compete with this, on let's say a 5-year, 10-year term, where you don't have that efficiency or scale? You don't have that. You're not buying at the same scale. Are you able to compete with the power purchase agreements that are offered by traders?
It depends. Always the answer, right? It depends. So I think on a 5-10 year term, you wouldn't compete with that tariff. What you would have is you'll have a fully paid off plant at the end of that 5 or 10 years that can basically then give you energy at a nominal price. That would be then far lower than what that provider can give you after 10 years, right? So it's important when you're looking at business cases to not look into 3 and 5 year business cases, but to look over the long term if you want to compare apples with apples, right? But that being said, someone that builds a 100 meg plant will quite obviously be able to provide tariffs today at lower prices than what we could do with rooftop solar many years ago when it was still more expensive. And what we always tell clients is be careful. It's important to understand what you can do today versus what you can do tomorrow. So a lot of, today you can sign up for these contracts and you'll get the energy maybe next year or the year after. Where rooftop solar, you've got the roof, you've got the space, you've got the capability, you can do it right now. You can start that savings for yourself immediately. You don't have to wait for someone to get access to the grid somewhere in the future. And like I say, it does not take the capability away to also sign up for that contract in the future. And that supplemental effect that we've spoken about is use your rooftop, use your space behind the meter and supplement then with wheeled power in the future when it becomes available.
If I may add, I think, like Hanno said, it's very difficult for on-site solar maybe to compete on a short-term contract. But in the longer term, it can compete, because I think something people sometimes forget is that when you have on-site solar, the tariff which you get offers compete to the tariff you pay to the utility or to Eskom. Whereas if you buy energy from a trader, their tariff is competing with the wheeling tariff or the WEB's tariff. So, for example, on a 20-year term, for example, a PPA on site could cost you R1 and your utility tariff is R2.20. So your saving is R1.20. If you are buying wheeled energy, it might be 70 cents, but you're competing against the WEB's tariff, which is R1.20. So you're only saving 50 cents. So it's actually your savings on site is much more significant than what you would have from a wheeling. And that's why, like Sanjeev also rightly said, it's a fantastic way to complement your on-site solar. But I think there is a bit of a misconception out there that wheeled power is inherently more affordable than on-site power. Maybe in the short term, but not in the long-term contracts.
Yeah, my takeaway from all of this is that there's definitely a complementary role for these two. And if I may say, a company like, if you enter into a PPA where there's a known price for energy delivered with an escalation, it offers some interesting commercial opportunities for SPS to optimize the plant, because the more they can optimize the plant after the PPA has been finalized, the more profit they can make. And sometimes it does take professional expertise to really optimize a plant on an ongoing basis. You might even have to change strategies midterm, reprogram the device as load shedding ends, and you want to change your algorithm as to how it charges batteries and discharges, because you have a new environment without load shedding. So is this, do you see opportunities in optimizing plant beyond what a normal customer just doesn't have that expertise?
Chris, yes. That's what we do, right? And that's what we're supposed to do. I always tell people we're a kilowatt hour business. So every kilowatt hour that we can get out of a solar system is money in the bank. I always say cha-ching. But jokes aside, that's the ultimate incentive, right? To make sure that the asset is performing optimally, is that we get paid per kilowatt hour delivered, which means we are ultimately incentivized to make sure that asset performs performs. And because we've got such a wide portfolio of assets, we can even think of the assets between each other, how we can move around components within our fleet, optimize certain, certain inverters work better in certain weather circumstances. We learned that later, so now we can take inverters off of this asset, take it to that one, optimize this one. We can decide to rather replace inverters early in a certain site and stretch another site from a life point of view. So there's many options when you're on the asset ownership side. You've got a wide array to optimize. We can work with OEMs. AI as a kind of words that is being thrown around a lot these days. And over time, these things will play more and more a role with the optimization of assets. And because we've got the data available, we're very well placed to be able to optimize performance and give our clients the best benefit that we possibly can. One of the challenges of solar PV is still space. And as Sanjeev also alluded to it, your roof is your roof. You've got a bit of parking space, and maybe it makes sense to do something in the parking lot. Maybe you can, maybe you can't.
But that's where wheeling can maybe complement.
And that's where wheeling definitely complements, right? I mean, you still got the time of day that you have to deliver the energy in, but you can definitely widen the footprint with the wheeling angle and make sure that you optimize from a cost and a renewable penetration point of view.
Anja, tell me, as a fleet owner, let's say in a particular municipality or geographic area, does this offer opportunities for you as a fleet owner to become an aggregator and with a central control room be able to monitor your resource, your energy storage, for example, and dispatch power on request by a municipality? Are you thinking along these lines as a company, as a fleet owner, of maybe being an aggregator who is able to deliver power on demand for commercial benefit, for arbitrage, in deals with a municipality, for example? Is this something you're thinking about, or is it still in the future?
Interesting question, Chris. I think we're still very much in the future with that one, but definitely there would be an opportunity for us to do so because we've got the fleet and we've got the ability to control it remotely. I think at the moment there's not a need yet in the market for distribution of energy and aggregating it in that fashion. But I do think with the wholesale market that is looming, in the future, there's definitely going to be very interesting opportunities for that.
And I mean, these fleet is in essence could be a virtual power plant that can deliver dispatchable power on demand from a customer, from a municipality, etc., and act as a virtual power station if you've got smart inverters, smart batteries that you can all monitor and control from a central point.
Yes, and a lot of the municipalities are also looking at that in the future, for especially like City of Cape Town. They are implementing control systems, or they're busy implementing control systems to do just that. So you can rely on your distributed energy sources to also help stabilize the grid in moments where it's needed.
And a topic I'd like to ask is about the question of going off grid. And when I look at this, it could be an individual customer deciding to go off grid, but probably more likely a case of a microgrid solution where one has solar and battery coupled with diesel or petrol for longer term storage. Is this happening, and is there a business case for an off-grid solution as part of your solutions that you provide customers?
Yes, that's a good question, Chris. I mean, off-grid is definitely a topic that's come up over the last few years, especially in the load shedding years. A lot of people thought they'll just like to defect from the grid. They don't want to deal with Eskom anymore. But the reality is that off-grid projects have existed for a very long time. I mean, there's a lot of customers which live on remote islands or like lodges or resorts. We've got a lot of projects in the moment in Kenya and in Seychelles where we're actually providing renewable energy solutions, like you said, that consist out of solar and battery that run with the existing genset on site, because that's the only way in which they can get power. There isn't a Eskom or a utility. In those cases, the business case is excellent. We are able to provide almost 90 to 95% renewable energy penetration. So it means that where you used to run 100% of diesel, now you only have to use 5% of diesel. When you look in the South African context, it is also something that's becoming more and more viable with the rise of electricity costs.
And the rise of diesel costs.
And the rise of diesel costs, exactly. We spoke about earlier, there are customers that can't get an Eskom connection, so the only option they have is to build a microgrid. And even if you look at the grid prices, in some cases it still makes sense to go off-grid. In certain municipalities, the tariffs are so high that you could actually go off-grid. The challenge we just face in urban areas is that you don't necessarily always have enough space to put enough solar panels down to cover you. But maybe just to put it into commercial sense, this is just general numbers, but if you run off diesel, it costs you around 8 Rand a kilowatt hour, maybe a bit more now these days with the fuel prices going up so dramatically. If you local utility, also depends on who you connect it to, but let's say Eskom, your price is around 2 Rand, 2.20 a kilowatt hour. And then if you look at solar, it's typically at 1 Rand or under 1 Rand per kilowatt hour. And if you go to off-grid, we can sit at about 3.50 Rand. So it's still a little bit higher than your utility power, but you can see it's dramatically less than diesel.
In remote situations where there's a lodge or hotel in a remote location, the cost of a connection, capital cost and the amortization of that cost really can add to the electricity
Definitely,
price.
yeah. So that could also be a big factor. And I think the nice thing is that because it's such a lucrative option, is that we can fund it through a funded offer. And especially when you are looking at a microgrid system, you want a provider that can look after the system holistically. It's no longer a complementary service. It's more holistic, and you are the power provider. And that's where it becomes important to pick a provider that is there, that's locally based, that can help you to maintain and look after the system.
Sanjeev, how many of your systems employ battery energy storage? I mean, I can just imagine your stores operate from 8 till 8, probably in the evening. Surely there's a need also to supply energy during that morning peak and the evening peak when the price of electricity can be very high, especially in winter. Does battery energy storage make sense? And are you looking at this seriously in your installations?
So we are. Currently, we don't use battery storage. So whatever we generate, we use directly. And because of the size of the systems, the footprints that we have, etc. But I think, coming back to the point around working closely with the supplier like SPS, they know our business, they know us well. So we started looking at batteries for some of our supermarkets. So we're currently working on a pilot project at the moment with SPS for a supermarket scale battery. So first time that we're doing it, I think other players in the market have done it. But now we can match batteries with an on-site generator, with a solar PV system in a smart microgrid and work out which is the most efficient, even from a tariff and from a cost-saving point of view as well.
Interesting. And then moving to you, Hanno, we talked about batteries and battery storage as a solution. And I'm interested to hear further from you as to the different business cases that you find for batteries or that you're looking at, maybe early stage still, but where are you seeing commercial benefit in battery energy storage solutions for customers?
Because that's an excellent question. And obviously with the prices of battery has coming down over the last, kind of 6-7 years, quite significantly, business cases start making more and more sense. So our first applications was for off-grid applications. So that's basically where you use your battery to store energy to use it later. So, in the on-grid environment, that would be backup power. So obviously in the load shedding years, that was the height of the battery business case, is to say, well, if you're at level 4 load shedding, the battery will basically offset diesel genset cost for you and give you a sustainable business, and uninterrupted power in most cases. cases, some businesses can't afford having the power going down even for, a second or two. So that was an important business case. But for us, it was also important to say, but what happens when load shedding is no longer with us? We all want load shedding to go away because we want to have the, reliable power in the country. And so that's where we started looking at stuff like tariff arbitrage. So for those who don't know, a lot of businesses are on time of use tariffs. That basically means your tariff is different at different times of day. Generally in the morning and the evening peak, you've got a very high tariff. During the day, you've got a standard tariff, and then late at night and over weekends, there's a lot of off-peak tariffs. And then what you do with the battery is you can charge the battery. You've got excess solar, you can take some of that into the battery, but you can also charge the battery then when it is off-peak or standard time, like at night. And then you discharge that battery in your peak period. So you don't take energy off of the grid then, you actually discharge your battery at that point in time, which is then the business case, is then the difference you get between the charging of the battery and the discharging at that peak period. And so tariff arbitrage is one of the business cases, and
peak shaving.
And then the other one is peak shaving. So what does that mean? So generally you get a charge for the maximum amount of power that you've taken from the municipality or Eskom in any month period. And what you do with the battery is you bring that maximum amount of power that you take off of the municipality down. And that's a very expensive tariff. So being able to bring that down for a client, maximum demand charge, is very important then as a savings tool. And so you can use a battery for both these applications. And today we do these things at a small scale for clients behind their meter. It's the perfect breeding ground for testing this technology, making sure your control systems work, and you can actually also start learning how to interact with the grid and the municipality and Eskom. And this is then the perfect breeding ground to learn for the bigger systems that you've spoken about, where you can actually dispatch to entire distribution systems within a municipality.
As a virtual power plant.
So
you are kind of trying this out on smaller scale standalone systems, but it's giving you learnings for possible opportunities in the virtual power plant market where you have a dispatchable resource and you aggregate a dispatchable resource.
Yes. So that's the breeding ground. That's where we learn, and that's gonna put us in us and other providers like us in a good space to actually step into that. As renewables grow, we also know that dispatchable power need to also grow at some point in time, and batteries will have a big role to play in that environment.
Yeah, and that brings me to you, Sanjeev. What do you consider before you embark on, say, a solar PV or solar plus battery in a store or in a particular site? What are the factors that you consider before? And then, of course, how do you, what is it that you look for in a solution provider for C&I solutions?
Yeah, good question, Chris. I mean, I think if you take a step before that, as a starting point, we looked across our entire business and where we could actually decarbonize in terms of electricity. Certainly in our distribution centers where we have sufficient roof space, but also in the stores as well, where the roof space is somewhat limited. But there's a number of factors to look at there. For example, can we use the roof? Is the roof strong enough? Do we have sufficient capacity or space to install the inverters, etc.? So a number of factors, technical factors that we look at. But I think what's more important, and with the more than 100 power purchase agreements that we have, is the selection of the supplier. So we want to work with credible suppliers like SPS. We want to work suppliers who have a track record in this space. And then the other important part is the reliability. And when the systems are reliable, when companies like SPS maintain the systems, manage these systems, then we get the long-term reliability, and that's what we want as a user.
I can imagine a small business probably doesn't pay too much attention to decarbonization, but does a company like Shoprite with such a high public profile feel these pressures on it?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we have engagements with our investors. So our investors are particularly keen in terms of understanding how we can decarbonize, or in fact, how we can improve our environmental profile. And decarbonization is certainly one part of it. We have discussions with and engagements with other rankers and raters. So a lot of discussion around that. But I think what's good with the Shoprite Group is that we've seen the benefit of doing renewable electricity even before the push to decarbonize came. our investors or from our other stakeholders. We see the importance of decarbonizing even before that came through. So in a way, we had the lead on that. We're on the journey a lot sooner than when the pressure came. So we're in a fortunate position like that. Like I said before, we've made these public commitments in terms of decarbonizing, approaching a net zero. It's a journey. I think rooftop solar PV and working with partners like SPS certainly makes an impact and a contribution towards that. But we've got other rods in the fire, as you say, as well.
Well, Sanjeev, Hanno, and Anja, we're coming to the end of this interview. It's been a great pleasure to discuss with you all these issues with customers who've got needs for solutions, and it's been really interesting. But in closing, I'd like to ask each one of you in turn and say, okay, and what do you say to customers who say, oh, well, load shedding is over, the pressure is off? What do you say to them?
I think it's a very subjective view. There's still some customers that believe that load shedding will come back. I think there's still a lot of factors that's beyond our control. The rising electricity prices from the utilities. I think it's going up another 8% in the near future. The fuel prices that we're seeing with the current state of world affairs, where a lot of people are still reliant on diesel, not just for backup power, but also where they can't get a grid connection to grow their operations. So I do think there's still a lot of scope for solar, and I think there's still a lot of scope for innovative solutions in solar. I think your standard grid-tied solar PV system that is doing cost savings like what the Shoprite group has employed is still going to be a very standard product, but there's definitely some novel interesting products that we're also looking at that addresses specific client needs that may not have been possible before because the technology didn't exist or the cost of the technology was such that it didn't make it feasible. So there's definitely some very interesting things that's happening. And then of course with wheeling, there's also the complementary energy, so you can actually cover a lot more of your utilization. So you can actually have more cost savings and also increase your renewable energy fraction to affect carbon savings and things like that.
Hanno, is there anything you'd like to add? The forward look for this sector, are there great opportunities ahead?
Yes, Chris. I think that I always have this joke. We were opening a plant in Namibia, our first 5 meg plant, and the minister was there, and they asked him, so what does he think about the future of solar energy? And he walked out the tent and he looked up at the sky and he said, the future looks bright. So I'm going to emulate that and say, I think the industry is moving very fast. Technology is changing very rapidly. This brings opportunity to optimize what's already there, which is a lot. But it also brings us new opportunities around how we can, in the world of batteries, supplement what we are doing for clients with that. Very interesting applications around, oversizing solar, using the additional batteries that's coming down in price at a rapid pace. And then using all of that, with smart, AI, I think is maybe being thrown about very loosely these days, but, with good technology, be able to make clients' environment way more resilient to the very uncertain energy environment that we currently have in South Africa. I mean, we still have got many challenges. So the generation has generally kind of stabilized in some form, but we're now in the grid environment where, there's a lot of work to be done around grids, and access to energy is actually becoming quite a bit of a challenge. We do see that a lot of clients coming around to say, sorry guys, Eskom just tells me I can't get a connection. What now? And in that world, we've got a big role.
The municipalities.
And municipalities similarly.
Exactly.
And in that world, we now have got solutions that is cost effective, that can basically give you your energy at the cost that Eskom or the municipality can give you if you've got enough space to actually, put up enough solar and supplement that in some way or form with batteries and generators and so forth. I mean, we've been doing this many years on the islands in Seychelles and in Kenya with lodges where, we've got lodges off of diesel generation up to 80-85%. And so there's no reason why we can't do that here in our backyard. We've got enough space available generally in the Africa countries. So we're looking forward to really take this industry forward and play a big role in the years to come.
Sanjeev, I started with you. I want to end with you, and I want to ask you, what is the road ahead for Shoprite?
Yeah, I think I'll steal a phrase from Hanno, the future is still bright for us. I mean, we believe that, independent of load shedding, there's still significant opportunities to use more renewable electricity. There's a significant amount of cost saving that can be realized. We still want to sell a loaf of bread for 5 rand in a Shoprite store, and this is what helps us to do that. And beyond that, we still want to realize our decarbonization ambitions and our goals there. And I think, we'll continue working with companies like SPS to push the boundaries, to get better, to do better, and to use more of the sun's energy.
Well, I like that, because what you said is your customers are king. You are looking after your customers. You're a customer, but you're not doing it just for yourself. You're also doing it to make the products that you sell to your customers more competitive, in the interest of your business, but in the interest of the customer. So I think we'll end on that note. It's a customer-focused note. It's been a really interesting discussion. I've really enjoyed engaging with a high-profile company like the Shoprite Group, and with a high-profile supplier of solutions in the renewable energy space. So with that, I'm going to call it a day, and thank you for listening.